Okay, so you're here because, like, you really want to get a handle on what went down with that Wisconsin Supreme Court race,
Yeah,
the one everyone's been talking about.
absolutely.
So that's what we're going to do today, unpack it all for you.
All right, sounds good.
We've got some really interesting stuff to work with today. It's a collection of actual search terms that people in Wisconsin were using,
Oh, wow.
as they were trying to find information about this election online.
Fascinating.
So it's kind of like we're peeking into the collective curiosity of the state, right?
Yeah, I like that.
Shows us exactly what questions people had top of mind.
Yeah.
So think of this episode as like a deep dive, okay?
Okay.
We're going to pull out the key information from all these searches,
All right.
try to figure out who the main players were,
Okay.
how much interest this whole thing really generated, and of course, what the final result seems to have been,
That makes sense.
all based on what folks were actively searching for online.
That's a really cool way to approach this.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's more than just looking at keywords.
Right.
These searches are, like you said, little windows into what the public really wanted to know, right?
Yeah,
What they were thinking about, what they were prioritizing, where their attention was focused during the election.
Exactly.
It's really valuable data.
So let's dive in.
Okay, let's do it.
The first thing that just jumps out at you when you see these searches
Yeah.
is how often two names appear together.
Okay.
Susan Crawford and Brad Schimmel.
Right.
So obviously we see individual searches for Susan Crawford and Brad Schimmel separately.
Sure.
But then there's this whole bunch of searches
Okay.
that put those two names directly against each other, like head to head.
Okay.
Like Crawford Skimmel polls, for example.
Interesting.
Or Schimmel versus Crawford polls.
Wow, okay.
Crawford versus Schimmel.
Got it.
And even the super direct Susan Crawford versus Brad Schimmel.
Wow. Yeah, that's
So it seems pretty obvious, right? That these two were the main contenders in the race.
definitely points to that.
It really highlights how the public conversation,
Yeah.
at least the online part of it,
Right.
really focused in on these two specific individuals.
Yeah.
And the fact that their names appear together so often in these searches
Yeah.
really suggests that a lot of people saw this as like a one-on-one contest.
A two-person race.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense.
And then following that same idea,
Okay.
it's really striking how many searches were all about who won the election.
Oh, interesting.
Like people really wanted to know the outcome.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of general searches,
Okay.
like Wisconsin election results or Wisconsin Supreme Court election results.
Sure.
But then it gets way more specific
Okay.
with searches like who won Wisconsin Supreme Court
Interesting.
or who won the Wisconsin Supreme Court election.
Wow.
It's like people were really anxious to find out who would be on the court.
I see. So it wasn't just casual curiosity. It seems like there was a real sense of importance attached to this particular race.
Yeah, definitely.
People wanted to know who won,
Right.
and they wanted to know pretty badly.
Exact. Yeah.
It really does underscore the significance that people attributed to this race.
Yeah.
They weren't just, checking the scores out of habit.
Right.
It reflects a genuine investment in, who's going to be serving on the state's highest court
Exactly.
and making those big decisions.
Huge decisions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
When you look at all those searches about who won, we find this very specific search.
Okay.
Susan Crawford wins.
Huh.
So what do you make of that?
Well, it certainly sounds like people were either looking for that information or they were confirming what they already thought.
Yeah. I mean, would you say that's a pretty strong indicator of the likely outcome?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
While we don't know for sure,
Right.
the exact context of that search or the intent behind it, the fact that it's there among all these other searches,
Right.
it definitely suggests
Yeah.
that the information people were looking for and probably finding
Right.
was that Crawford won the election.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and talk about the timing of everything.
All right.
Because there's a real sense of like urgency
Okay.
in some of these searches.
Interesting.
Like people really wanted information fast.
I see.
So we see multiple searches
Yeah.
asking about when the polls close.
Okay.
Like when do polls close in Wisconsin?
Right.
What time do polls close in Wisconsin?
Got it.
Wisconsin polls close. And all kinds of variations on those.
Makes sense.
So clearly people wanted to know when they had to get their votes in.
Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense.
It's, that kind of inquiry
Yeah.
about poll closing times
Mm-hmm.
often means you've got an active and engaged electorate, people who are like planning their day around voting or making sure they don't miss that deadline.
Exactly.
It's a good sign.
And that desire for timely information,
Yeah.
it carries over to the results too.
Okay.
You see searches popping up like election results today and Wisconsin election results today.
Makes sense.
It's obvious that people were looking for those answers like right away.
As soon as they could get them.
Yeah, as soon as the polls closed, basically.
Yeah, I get it.
Plus, we even have searches for Wisconsin election results 2025
Right.
and Wisconsin elections 2025,
Yeah,
which tells us for sure that this whole thing happened last year.
absolutely.
No doubt about it.
Right.
Those today queries
Yeah.
really capture that feeling of anticipation, right? Right after an election.
I know exactly what you mean.
Like that waiting
Yeah.
to see what happens.
That nail-biting moment.
Right. And people want to know the outcome immediately
Uh-huh.
and then start figuring out what it all means.
Right. Yeah, you want to make sense of it all
Right.
as
Exactly.
soon as possible.
Okay. So another big area of interest,
Right.
based on these searches at least,
Yeah.
was polling.
Okay.
Like a lot of people were looking up poll data.
Interesting.
So we see tons of queries related to polls,
Okay.
like just general ones like
Yeah.
Wisconsin Supreme Court race polls or with Supreme Court election polls.
Sure.
And then some that are more focused on the individual candidates.
Right.
Like Susan Crawford polls
Got it.
and Brad Simmel polls.
Okay.
So clearly people were trying to get a sense of how the race was shaping up.
Yeah, before the actual election.
Exactly. Like they wanted to see who was ahead,
Uh-huh.
get a feel for the trends.
Right.
Polls are really interesting
They are.
because they can act as a sort of barometer,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
public opinion
That's a good way to put it.
leading up to an election.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the volume of these searches
Yeah.
tells us that people were really trying to gauge, the likely direction of the race
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even understand,
Right.
what factors were
Yeah.
influencing voters.
Yeah, like what issues were resonating with people.
Exactly.
Can-
And it gets even more specific.
Okay, how so?
Well, we see a search for Wisconsin Supreme Court race polls live.
Oh, wow. Live updates.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
So it seems like people wanted the most up-to-date information possible.
Real-time snapshots.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
They didn't just want like static predictions.
Right.
They wanted to follow any shifts or changes as they happened.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think so too.
The fact that people were interested in live poll updates,
Mm-hmm.
it really highlights how important
Okay.
and how competitive this particular race was.
Yeah, people were really glued to it.
Yeah, it was a close one.
Wow.
Okay, so there's this one search that really stands out to me.
All right, what is it?
Why is the Wisconsin Supreme Court race so important?
Huh. That's a good question.
Right.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is...
Our set of search terms doesn't actually give us the answer to that question.
Right.
But the fact that people were asking it
Yeah.
so directly
Uh-huh.
tells us something really important.
Okay. I'm curious, what do you think it tells us?
Oh, I think it means that people recognize that this election was about more than just,
Okay.
the individual candidates.
Right.
Like they understood that the outcome could have a bigger impact on the state as a whole.
Yeah, like a broader significance.
Exactly.
So it suggests a certain level of civic awareness
Right.
and an understanding that these Supreme Court races,
Yeah.
they're not just routine elections.
They're a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
It really raises the question
Okay.
of why this particular contest
Right.
seems so important to Wisconsin voters.
What were the issues or circumstances that made it stand out?
Yeah, what was it about this specific election
Mm-hmm.
that made people think, this is a big one?
Right. We need to pay attention to this.
Exactly.
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah. It is, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it also seems like people were getting their information
Okay.
from a lot of different places.
Right.
Not just, one or two sources.
Makes sense.
So we see searches for app and app news.
Yeah. The Associated Press.
Right, exactly.
Classic news source.
And then there's C-SPAN.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe people were watching coverage on C-SPAN
Yeah.
or looking for their analysis.
Right.
And then we get these kind of unexpected searches.
Okay, like what?
Well, things like Musk,
Huh.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk?
Yeah, Elon Musk, Wisconsin.
Wow. What was he doing in Wisconsin?
And Musk, Wisconsin.
That's a little out of the ordinary.
It is, right?
Yeah. What do you think that means?
Well, it's hard to say for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that Elon Musk's name is popping up in these searches
Yeah.
could mean a few different things.
Okay, like what?
Well, maybe he said something publicly about the election.
Oh, that's possible.
or, got involved in some kind of online discussion
Yeah.
about it. It's also possible that his name just got connected to the race somehow.
Right, through social media or something.
Yeah, exactly.
And that made people curious.
Right, like what's Elon Musk got to do with this?
Yeah, why is his name coming up?
It's really interesting
It is.
because it shows how even people who aren't directly involved in politics can become part of the conversation.
Yeah, they can get pulled in
An election.
in unexpected ways.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the power of the internet, I guess.
I guess so.
And social media.
Yeah.
And everything.
Okay, so we also see searches for Scott Walker.
Oh, Scott Walker.
Yeah, a big name of Wisconsin politics.
I know who he is, yeah.
Right.
Former governor.
Exactly.
So maybe people were looking for his take on the race?
Yeah, that's possible.
Like, did he endorse anyone?
Right? Or what were his opinions?
Or maybe they just wanted to see what he was saying about it.
Yeah, maybe.
Interesting.
And then we have some local news outlets showing up.
Okay.
Like, wow.
Local coverage? Exactly. It makes sense that people would turn to those sources.
Yeah, especially for something like a state Supreme Court race. And then there's just this single search term, checking.
Checking, just that one word.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It feels really significant in this context, though, don't you think?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like, maybe it means people were actively trying to verify information.
Oh, like fact-checking.
Yeah, or looking for updates from multiple sources.
So they weren't just taking one source at face value.
Exactly.
They were doing their due diligence.
Yeah, I think so.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, it is.
It shows a healthy skepticism.
Right.
And a desire to be informed.
Exactly.
So geographically, the focus is super clear.
Right.
I mean, the constant use of Wisconsin and why throughout these search terms.
Yeah.
There's no question about where this election took place.
Exactly.
We even have Wisconsin election results by county,
Right.
which shows that people wanted to know how different parts of the state voted.
Like a really local breakdown.
Exactly, a granular view.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And you even see the misspelling Wisconsin a few times.
That's a common one.
Which I guess just proves that even when people are trying to be specific, they can still make typos.
Yeah, we're all human.
For sure.
It happens.
Okay, so just to kind of give you the full picture here.
All right.
We have a whole bunch of other search terms.
Okay.
That basically confirm what we've already been talking about.
All right.
Like they all relate to the Supreme Court election in Wisconsin.
Okay. What are some of them?
Well, we've got Supreme Court, of course.
Right.
Elections. Election news.
Makes sense.
Election 2025. Supreme Court, Wisconsin. Supreme Court election.
Right.
Wisconsin vote. Wisconsin vote results.
Okay.
Wisconsin voting results.
Yeah.
Wisconsin judge election. Wisconsin judge race.
Interesting.
Judge Susan Crawford. Judge Crawford. Wisconsin court election. Wisconsin Supreme Court race.
Okay.
Well, it's a Supreme Court race. Wisconsin Supreme Court justices.
Right.
Wisconsin election Supreme Court. Wisconsin Supreme Court vote.
Got it.
Wisconsin judge. Supreme Court justices.
Okay.
Live. Wisconsin election results.
Wow, that's a lot.
Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. APU Wisconsin election.
Yeah.
Elections 2025 and Wisconsin State Supreme Court election.
It really does show you how much attention this race got.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Definitely.
So all of those searches, they really just provide more evidence
Okay.
that people were interested in this election.
Right.
And that they were looking for information about it online.
They wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Those more general terms, they're like the supporting cast, you know.
Yeah.
They confirm the main theme. And show that there was a lot of public awareness about this election.
Yeah, they paint a broader picture.
Exactly.
Okay, so then there's one final search term that's kind of on its own.
Right, what is it?
Is Susan Crawford married?
Huh.
So it's like a little glimpse into a more
Yeah.
personal question.
Right, someone's curious about her personal life.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good reminder
Mhm.
that, behind every candidate,
Right.
there's a whole person.
Yeah, a human being
Exactly.
with a life outside of politics.
And sometimes people are curious about that.
Right?
Even if it doesn't really have anything to do with, their qualifications for office.
Exactly.
It's just human nature, I guess.
I think so.
To be curious about people.
Yeah.
Especially people in the public eye.
Okay, so let's try to sum all this up for you.
All right.
Based on this deep dive
Yeah.
into what people were searching for online,
Mm-hmm.
we can see that there was a lot of public interest in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race.
A huge amount of interest
Right.
is a big deal.
And that interest was really focused on the two main candidates, Susan Crawford and Brad Schimmel.
Right.
The search data also strongly suggests
Yeah.
that Crawford won the election.
Which is what people were looking for.
Right.
And probably finding
Exactly.
when they did those searches.
We also saw how important timing was to people, especially when it came to the polls closing.
Yeah, they wanted to know when to vote.
Right.
And then they wanted the results as soon as possible.
Immediately.
Right.
And then, of course, polling data
Yeah.
was a big area of interest, as was the question of why this particular race was so important.
Like, why did it matter so much?
Exactly.
It's a good question.
It is. A really good question.
And finally, it's clear that people were getting their information from all sorts of places.
Yeah, all over the internet.
News websites, local news sources.
Right.
Even some unexpected places.
Like Elon Musk.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a surprise.
So, yeah, these search terms, when you look at them all together.
They really show us a picture of an engaged public.
Right. People who are paying attention.
Actively seeking out information.
Throughout the whole election cycle.
Yeah, from beginning to end.
It's impressive.
They were trying to understand the polls. They wanted to know the results right away.
Yeah.
And they were even thinking about the bigger meaning of the election.
Like what it meant for the state.
Exactly.
It's great to see that level of engagement.
I agree.
It's a good sign.
So here's a final thought for you.
Okay. I'm listening.
Given how intense these searches were.
Yeah.
And how many people were clearly interested in this state Supreme Court race.
Right.
What do you think it means?
That's a good question.
Like, what does this level of public engagement tell us about how people view these judicial bodies?
The courts.
Right.
I think it shows that people are starting to understand how important they are.
Yeah.
Like they're not just these abstract institutions anymore. They have a real impact on people's lives.
Exactly.
And I think people are realizing that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Which is a good thing.
Definitely.
It means they're paying attention.
Right.
We're holding these institutions accountable.
Exactly.
That's how it should be.
It is.
Yeah.
It's encouraging.
So that's something to think about.
Yeah.
You know, as you go about your day.
I will.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
It was my pleasure.
It was great having you.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Today is your lucky day. Today is the day that our $3 website works for you, paying you directly to your PayPal daily. Imagine $3 ongoing continuous payments to your PayPal account. Imagine falling asleep and waking up to $300 in your PayPal account. How would this make you feel? How could this help you? What bills could you pay? What kind of fun could you have? What does that retirement look like now? All for a one-time payment of $3. This website is DFY done for you, fully built and completely hosted, and never stops collecting payments for you. You have spent $3 on coffee on a regular, but that coffee won't help you create multiple streams of income. Click the link below.